Welcome to this PermaJet webinar on the art of paper selection. Sorry, I had a slight technical error there with my sharing. The aim of this webinar is to give guidance on how to choose the appropriate paper for your images. It's going to take the form of a PowerPoint presentation with a number of slides that takes you through the process on what to consider when choosing a paper and quite important factors to take on board. At the end of it, there'll be a Q&A. So if you have any questions to raise, please do so via the chat icon at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so my name's Colin Hulley, and I work in the UK Sales and Technical Support Department for PermaJet. And I've presented this PowerPoint to a number of camera clubs where there's a requirement to know and understand or what kind of paper to choose. Okay, so choosing the right paper for your images. The most common question we get asked is, what paper would you recommend for example, landscape or portraits, still life? And the issue we face with that when being asked that question is it's not actually our image. We don't know the look and feel that you are wanting to achieve with your image. Everyone has personal choices and personal preferences when they're looking at how their images are. So there is no right or wrong paper choice, only one that gives you a print that you are happy with. Okay. So that's quite key. It's a print that you are happy with. So when we get asked that question, the first question I'm going to ask you back is, what printer do you have? Because not everyone has something like a Canon Pro 300, A3 Plus Fine Art printer, or an Epson SCP 700. A lot of people may have what we would call a lower level kind of printer. Something along the lines of maybe an Epson XP 715 or a Canon MG 3550. And the issue that we face with those kind of printers is that they're not always capable of handling the thicker fine art papers. Certain printers, certainly like some of the Canons, like the MG 3550 or the HPs, you have a cassette or a feed-in at the bottom of the printer, which goes coating side down. You feed it into the printer and it does a U-turn and it comes back out of the printer in the same way. So feed in, feed out from the same point of view. The trouble is with some of the thicker fine art papers in the Baryta range and the fine art range is that they won't transport and do that U-turn within the printer. They're too thick, they're too stiff. So if that's the case, those two families of papers, the Baryta and fine art, are ruled out. So there's therefore, when we're asked this question of which paper, we can exclude those from the discussion. If your printer does fall into that criteria that it won't handle thicker, heavier weight papers, you're then routed down what we call the digital photo route. Now, these papers are easier to make because of the quality of the paper base. They have a polyethylene coating, which goes on top of the paper, and then we put our ink receiving layer on the top. They are more economical to make, and they have the flexibility of the paper base to go through any form of printer. There is a slight downside to that, in that they have less archival stability if you're wanting images to last any length of time. Any paper, regardless of manufacture, and this talk encompasses all brands of paper, not just PermaJet, but Photospeed, Hahnemuhle, whoever. Any print is always capable of absorbing pollutants or whatever is in the air. So when you're displaying or showing prints, you have to be careful on how to do so and make sure they're in an environment that protects them to the utmost. So the coating technology that we use on the digital photo range aren't as stable if left unprotected than maybe some of the fine art prints. So typically we say within the industry, maybe about 15 years, 20 years. It just depends where they are stored as to how long they will last. If they're behind glass or in an album or a book or whatever, and they are archivally stable, conservation quality, then you should have no issues. But if they're unprotected, then they can sometimes deteriorate over a number of years. However, they are more economical, therefore they are more popular to buy. And they're a very good starting point if you are new to printing. Therefore, once you've chosen like the digital photo range, the next question we would ask you is, well, what kind of look do you want? What surface do you want? Because you can see that we have 4 surfaces within the PermaJet range. We have the gloss, we have a luster, we have matte, and we have metallic. Depending on how you're going to display your images, if you're putting them behind glass, for example, on the wall, you wouldn't choose a gloss paper because you potentially would have what we call double reflection, and it would detract from the actual image itself. So if you're putting images onto the wall, in terms of display, it's best if you use a high quality glass that's got a very low iron content, so that the possibility of reflection is greatly reduced, but also increases the UV stability and filtration. So if you are wanting a gloss look, because that's the kind of look you're wanting to achieve, within the PermaJet range, you've got 2. You've got Gloss 271 and you've got Smooth Gloss 280. The difference between those two is in one way is the weight. So the numbers that you see depicted on screen actually determine or specify the GSM, the grams per square meter for each of those products. So Gloss 271 is 271 GSM and Smooth Gloss 280. So Smooth Gloss is slightly heavier, slightly more sturdy, but also slightly warmer than the gloss. Gloss 271 is a cooler paper, a cold white, whereas Smooth Gloss is subtly warmer. And that might be important depending on what the image is of. If for me, it's a monochrome image, I worked for 30 years at Ilford and Harman. Our darkroom papers were typically cold whites and strong blacks. And after 30 years, that's the kind of look and feel that I really like to see. Had to work for Agfa, for example, for 30 years, where their darkroom papers were traditionally warmer, then I may favour a warmer kind of base tint on the white. But for me, it's a colder one. So is it a monochrome or is it colour? A colder base tint might give you a bit more contrast, a bit more punch on some of your colours than a slightly warmer one. So that's one question you've got to ask if it's gloss. If it's not gloss you're after, but actually what you're considering is what we would call a luster finish or satin or silk. Different phrases are used by different manufacturers. Within the PermaJet range, we now have 4 papers. We've got Oyster 271, which is what I would call a neutral tone base tint, and is our most popular paper. It's a good all-rounder, and a lot of people will start off using Oyster and to experiment with and then develop into other papers going forward. So you've got Oyster 271 neutral. You've got the Smooth Pearl slightly heavy at 280. This is a subtly warmer base tint, a bit like the Smooth Gloss. So again, is it skin tones on your image? Is it portraits you're doing? That can give a bit more warmth and punch to the flesh tones. Is it an image, say, of an autumnal landscape where you've got lots of golds and browns? Again, that might give you a bit more of a kick that you're looking for to try and enhance those warm colours. You've then got Ultra Pearl 295, slightly heavier. And this paper has got a pronounced stipple finish to it. So it's very robust, very hard wearing. So if a lot of people use it for, photographers use it for preview albums, where an album is going to be handed around a number of people, maybe a family within a wedding, to choose images. So it's very robust, doesn't show finger marks, doesn't scratch easily. And a kind of trade-off for that in a way is the fact that the stipple finish, if you try and scan it, will reflect back. So it's got a form of kind of like anti-copyright, if you will, to protect your images, certainly. Then the fourth paper within the luster finish is Photo Luster 310. Again, another step up in weight, but even though it's 310, it's got the flexibility to be used in any form of printer. So even though it's 310, don't think, oh, it's too heavy to go through a printer. It has that flexibility of base construction. Now, the thing for me for Photo Luster, it's got a lovely surface to it. It's like a silk sheen finish to it. Oyster's quite smooth in its finish. Smooth pearl quite similar, and ultra pearl more pronounced. But Photo Luster is just a notch back off the ultra pearl in terms of the finish. For me, what I like about the Photo Luster is the strong whites and blacks. For monochrome images, that's my paper of choice, certainly. It gives me the look and feel of what I used to expect from a bit like the old Kodak DMP papers of old. It kind of harks back to that kind of finish. But I say the cold whites and the strong blacks, for me, give excellent black and whites. And again, that cold white gives more punch. Now, for some people, certainly when we're talking monochrome images, people that sometimes don't want to have such a bright, contrasty white. And that's where things like the Oyster, where it kind of tones it back a little bit so that you don't focus too much on the white points within the image. Sometimes if it's too white a base, it might detract the eye. So by reining back the base tint and having something a little bit softer like the Oyster kind of brings away that detraction, so to speak. So these are certain considerations only you can make as the photographer and the printer. And it comes back, as I said at the start, what paper, what look and feel are you trying to achieve? In the third range, we have a matte paper. Ideal for going behind glass, really, although even so luster can do, you can still sometimes maybe see a bit more sheen than you would like. So a matte paper for display behind glass is ideal. We have two in the PermaJet range. We have Matte Plus 240, which is a lovely smooth paper. It's very sharp in terms of its ink. When the ink is put onto the paper, it remains very sharp. So you don't have any, sometimes on a matte paper, and we'll come to this when we touch on the fine arts, sometimes a matte paper can maybe give the hint of slight softening because of how the matte coating works. With Matte Plus 240, it retains that sharpness, and that's why it's quite popular. Also, the price point is very economical as a matte paper, and is very good for colour and monochromes. Some matte papers you'll find will kind of take some of the saturation out of the colours, which you don't get when you have a gloss or a luster. Matte Plus seems to keep a bit more level of saturation in there than other matte papers. The other one under the matte range is matte proofing. It's a 160 gram, and this is an ideal paper for proofing, as it's by its title. Quite popular in education, where it's got an inkjet coating on, and students can produce work for their GCSEs or whatever it might be, and portfolios to hand in. So it's quite popular in that market. Within the hobbyist market, it's very good for people to actually just to get a print off their printer and just check things like composition and arrangement maybe of the image and whatever, because it's a very low cost product. Therefore, if you're happy with what you've printed, you can then upscale to a more expensive piece of paper. Certainly if you move on to the fine art, which I'm coming to in a minute regarding cost. The fourth product range that we have within the digital photo is the metallic range. Now, these papers have a silver base tint to them, hence the phrase why they're called metallic. And within that, you've got two. You've got a gloss and you've got a luster. So, Ken, what kind of finish, what kind of look are you wanting to achieve? How is the image going to be displayed or stored? Now, metallic papers could be very, what I would call, fickle with the image. Whereas Oyster really can handle any type of image, as an example. The titanium is a little bit more, how would we say, as I say, fickle. Images it suits, for example, in my opinion, are images like chrome on the side of a motorbike, it's highly polished. Architecture, sun glinting off the shard has been, I've seen some spectacular images. Panoramics of, say, a seafront or a cityscape at night, where you got quite a bit of dark, but then you got lots of light to give punch. Metallic kind of lends itself to that. Having said that, I've also seen some excellent wildlife images. One in particular was of a brown duck that was on a riverbank where the cobbly stones were wet with moisture. And it was printed on titanium luster, and it really brought vibrancy and life to the plumage of the bird. It was absolutely super. Not a paper I would have chosen on that occasion, but one that was selected by the client when we were doing a seminar. She said, can we print on this? We printed on it. I must admit, I think my face may have given it away. I was thinking, really? Is that the kind of image the paper you want to use? But we printed on it and it looked superb. But if it doesn't work, it's not the paper's fault. Okay, it just means it needs to be printed on another paper. Okay. And then within the range, again, metallic, I say you've got a gloss or a luster finish. So those are the kind of combinations you've got. Going back to the flow chart, if your printer can handle heavyweight papers, the next question we have to ask is cost an issue? In the current climate, it's only too obvious that people have got concerns about the cost of paper and the cost of ink. And if cost is an issue, then you really back down to the digital photo route, because that is the most economical range that we and other manufacturers produce. And the same questions will go through there. If cost isn't an issue, it might be you still want to go down the digital photo route. There's no exclusion to doing so if a paper within that range gives you what you're looking for. Okay. If cost isn't an issue, then we're going to move on to the next two families of papers, okay, which is the fibre-based Baryta and the Fine Art. Now, in the top left-hand corner, you can see that there is a sample pack image. And what we do at PermaJet, and other brands do as well, is that if there's a family of papers that you've identified here tonight that you're interested in, but you're not too sure which one will actually work with the image or your images, a test pack is an ideal way to dip your toe, one, into the PermaJet waters, if you're not familiar with our range of papers, and then to try one image on all the different papers and to see which one gives you the look and feel that you're looking for. Okay, something to consider. But if cost is not an issue, then we can move on to what we call the fine art ranges, the fibre-based Baryta and the Fine Art. So again, we do test packs for these. Test pack 2 is the one nominated for the fibre-based Baryta range. And then we've got test pack 3, which is for the textured paper range. So in the middle diamond there, you can see I'm asking a question, do you want cotton rag? I'm actually going to rejig this slide and it's going to say matte paper. Do you want a matte paper look? Because if you do want a matte paper look, because you don't want a gloss or lustery silk finish, then you're moving over to what we call the Fine Art range here. And these are predominantly what we call cotton rag based. That means that the base construction is predominantly, if not at all, cotton rag. A couple of the products will have a cotton rag and alpha cellulose mix, and alpha cellulose is effectively wood pulp. But they are all classed as a matte paper. And if your printer supports two different blacks, for example, a photo black or a matte black, like the Epson 600, 800, 700, 900 series, or the Canon Pro 300, Pro 1000, Pro 200, matte papers should use a matte black, because the matte black is designed for the matte coatings that are used by paper manufacturers. The photo black is predominantly used only on the gloss or luster finishes. Now, you can use a photo blacking on a matte paper, because the ink will be absorbed. However, if you have large areas of black, then you might see in certain lighting conditions that the ink hasn't quite really absorbed as properly as it should have done. But if you've got just fine details of black, you can get away with it. If you try and put a matte black onto a gloss or luster paper, it will tend to sit on the surface because the molecules can't be absorbed by the coating, and it will just smudge and not dry. So that's just something to bear in mind if your printer supports the two. So if we're looking at the fine art range, we've got 4 types within that. We do have a silk finish, even though it's classed as silk, and I said before, silk is like the gloss on the other side of the image here. Photo Art Silk at 290 GSM is one of my favourite papers. It's an unsung hero of mine from within the PermaJet range. It is a matte paper, but it has got a sheen surface to it that you only actually see once the ink is placed on the paper. Now, when I'm demonstrating this paper, I tend to use images such as time-lapse rivers or waterfalls are very popular. Seascapes is good as well. Anything to do with water, for me, kind of gives a lift to it. It's not just water related, but that kind of thing where I want to just give it an overall lift works really well. Other examples of photo art silk being well used are if you're doing macro photography, say, of a flower head, and you've got dewdrops or raindrops on there. It just gives a bit of life to make them actually look like they are water to the touch, so to speak. So it's quite a popular one of mine, photo art silk, and as I say, a bit of an unsung hero. We've then got ultra smooth, and these papers, when you hold up to the light, are perfectly smooth. There's no form of texture whatsoever. And in this range, we've got 3 papers. We've got Portfolio Rag 220. So it's a lightweight paper at 220 GSM. Very popular for wedding albums and books because it's easy to crease and to fold in a book. Okay. Quite popular for that application. We've then got Amiga and Alpha Natural, both what we call rag papers, as well as the Portfolio, cotton rag based, both 310 GSM. Now, the difference between the two is optical brighteners. Now, what an optical brightener is a chemical that we have placed into the coating or the base to lift the brightness of the paper up. Now, there are certain markets and certain points of view that don't like the use of optical brighteners because that's the chemical that under environmental attack, as I say, things like maybe deodorant, smoking, food, varnishes, paints, things in the air that you can't see, but you sometimes can smell or taste, but not necessarily all the case, will attack the print. And it's this chemical, the optical brightener, that can react and start to go yellow. So your whites will start to turn yellow. So alpha is what we call OBA free. So if a client is looking for a paper with no optical brighteners in, then alpha is one of our first choices. Now, there is information on our website, which gives you the technical specification of each of the papers. And within that, it will tell you as to whether the paper has got optical brighteners in or not. And there's also a document that you can download from our website called The Knowledge, which gives a lot more detail on each of the individual papers, to give you more guidance on its white point and applications, etc. And that's a very useful document to download. It is quite large, so please take a while for it to download. So alpha is OBA free, and Amiga has a certain level of optical brightener in. So when we sit down with the mills who produce our papers for us, we will sit down with them and we'll give them like a product specification, whether we want it to be cotton rag or Baryta or digital photo. How heavy do we want it? How textured or smooth, and how white? Those are the kind of questions that the proposals we put to them, so that they can then draw up options for us. We then go and choose options that they give us, and then we produce a new paper. So in February, we've got a new range of papers coming out called the Heritage range, watercolor rag, smooth rag, Baryta rag, and etching rag. And this process of sitting down with the mill and discussing options and bright white points and weights was something we did about 18 months ago. And we're now coming to the end of that process and launching the products, as I say, in February. So going back to the slide, Omega and Alpha, both the same weight. Alpha optical brightness, none, and Omega does have some in it. Okay. The next section you've got is smooth. Although we say smooth, when you hold these papers up to the light, you can see a very subtlety of texture to them. So they're not ultra smooth, but they are considered to be smooth. And two in this range, Portrait Rag 285 and Portrait White 285. Again, the fundamental difference here is that Portrait White has got additional optical brightness into the base, so that, again, for myself, for monochrome images, I much prefer to use a brighter base point, and therefore I would use Portrait White for monochromes. Again, color images may be a bit more punch, a bit more contrast. Just depends on the image and what its content is of. In the final column on the cotton rag, we have what the textured range. Now, again, hold these up to the light and you can see certainly defined texture. The most popular one by far within this range is the Museum Heritage 310. So it's a good weight at 310 GSM, a good texture to it, not too pronounced, and it's ideal for giving kind of life to things like if you do a close-up of a barley field or grasses, ferns, also texture of moss on trees. Again, if you do pet portraiture, for example, it kind of gives life to fur or plumage. It's a brilliant paper, all-rounder for the textured range. As they say, it's our most popular. You've then got two more. One is Artist Color, Watercolor 250 and Gallery Etching 310. These are heavily textured papers. Artist watercolor, I would call a pronounced texture that kind of protrudes from the base. And gallery etching is what I would call like a dimpled texture. It goes into the base. Now, they are quite pronounced. And sometimes when people look at small sample prints of these papers, they kind of shy away and think, oh, no. Because on a small image, a heavy texture will probably dominate and overpower the image, especially if it's got a delicacy to it. But we like to think big, and that is A3, A3 plus, A2, even roll media. And then your viewing distance goes back. And then you can see how the texture actually helps and works with the image. So we're always cautious about people when they say, oh, I don't like that. And we say, well, just think big, because actually it might work for you. Now, as I mentioned before, when I was talking about mattes plus 240, a matte paper can give the perceived a perception that maybe of slight softening of the image. So a textured paper would even enhance that even more. And generally, if you've got a lot of delicate, fine imagery, you may not want to use a heavy textured paper because it'll just break it up and destroy it too much. If you want to retain detail and sharpness, then look at the ultra smooth ranges to make sure that that is kept to, if that's what you're looking for. Okay, test pack 3 is the option for a test pack for the fine art papers. Again, if you're looking to try one image on all different papers, that's the best way to see which ones work for you. If it's not a matte paper you're looking for, now we move into what we call a fiber-based Baryta. Now, the paper bases that we use in these papers come from the darkroom, and it's the same base construction that multigrade fiber-based example from Ilford they use in their darkroom papers, because when you were putting paper into chemistry, you needed to make sure it didn't dissolve like blotting paper. So we use the same paper-based construction in these papers. We also use, there's an element in the paper base called barium sulfate, which enhances their archival stability. And it's the same chemical that is used in darkroom papers or similar. and it has the same purpose, to extend and protect the archival stability of the paper and the image. In the Baryta range, we have three surfaces. We have gloss. And it's not a shiny gloss. It's what we would call, from the darkroom days, unglazed gloss. And again, like we had with the luster papers on the digital photo, we've got a neutral tone, which is royal gloss. We've got a cold tone, which is distinction 320. We've got gold silk, which has a warmth to it. And then we've got monogloss at 320, which does have a bit of an extra glossy kick to it. Okay. So again, if you're looking at monochromes or color images and you want to just have smooth gradations and tonal ranges, royal gloss may be more favored than maybe the distinction, which again is more punchy and contrasty, because that's got the colder white to it. Our biggest seller is the gold silk, and very popular with fine art portraiture because of how it helps work with the skin tones. And at 315 is a good weight of paper to have. And of course, a good side of having a heavyweight paper is if you're going to be mounting the images onto board or whatever, the bigger, the thicker, the heavier the base, then the easier it is for you to be mounting onto a substrate. If it's not gloss you're after, because of the issues we've said before, maybe reflection or just not what you're looking for, we have a pearl finish, fiber-based pearl 300, a good weight. It's got quite a bit of warmth to it when compared to certainly something like the distinction. And it's got a nice surface finish to it. It's not smooth. It's got an element of texture to it. Very robust, very sturdy. And since its launch about 4 or 5 years ago now, has been proven very popular indeed. And it's one of my favoured ones if I'm looking at the Baryta range, certainly, for monochrome or colour. I like the warmth it's got, certainly for skin tones. It's wonderful. The final paper in the Baryta range is matte 285. And like the matte plus 240, it's got a good base tint. It's got a good sharpness. It retains a good level of saturation. The benefit over matte 240 from digital photo is this is archivally stable with pigmented inks. And let me just touch upon those while we're at this point, shall we? Because we get asked a lot of question between, you know, dye inks and pigment inks, and also manufacturers' own inks and third-party inks. So I might as well just cover that at this moment in time. The papers on screen that you can see there now, all these papers qualify as what we would call giclée, if you're familiar with that phrase. It's kind of like the industry standard for fine art prints. If a giclée paper used with pigmented inks on a printer of improved capability, the top end, so to speak, really, where you've got 6 or more inks is typically where the tipping point is. Those will give you images of the ultimate archival capability and conservation subject to storage conditions. So if behind glass, in an album, or in a storage box that is acid-free, pH neutral, you're going to get the maximum kind of archival qualities that you need. Dye-based inks, cheaper to produce and cheaper to sell, unfortunately don't have the same archival qualities as pigmented inks. And what can happen is, over time, depending again, once again, on these caveats of storage and display, can degrade over time. If it's only for short-term use and that's what your printer's got, then you're not going to have any issues whatsoever. You know, if it goes into a wedding album and it's of good quality and it's acid-free, and the interleaving that's in there is pH neutral, you're not going to get any interaction, and therefore you should have no issues with your images at all. PermaJet's preferred, certainly if you're selling work, is that you are using pigmented inks to give your end client the ultimate in longevity and archival quality. The next question we get asked a lot of the time is, what do we think about third-party inks? We sell third-party inks. We sell our own Image Life for use on a selected range of Epson printers with our EcoFlow systems. They're of UK manufacture, and they are have been tested by an offside lab for archival permanence. So there's no issues with using those. And there are other brands in the marketplace. We sell Jet Tech and Blue Box through our sister company, Premier Ink. With the cost of living crisis that we're going through at the moment, we have noticed a number of clients are starting to move away from maybe the more expensive manufacturer's own inks to third-party inks. All we will say about the use of third-party inks is stick with the same brand if colour is critical for your work. And why we say that is that although you can maybe buy a Jet Tech or a Blue Box or a Cartridge Save or Cartridge World, although those cartridges are all compatible with your printer, if the shade of vivid magenta from one manufacturer is significantly different to the other, then what can happen is you might have a shift in your colours. Therefore, if you stick with one brand, hopefully that brand won't change the saturation of their ink. And if you're using custom profiles, then you should have consistency from print to print to print. But people who chop and change have in the past experienced issues with colour. So our point of view is we have no issues with them, but certainly for the optimum quality, we would strongly recommend you stick with the manufacturer's own inks. But we fully understand why people at this current economic time may well be looking to move on. Okay, so test pack 2 on screen applies to the Baryta range, and test pack 3 there for the cotton rag. Okay, so these are the test packs that we do. There is a fourth one in the range, which is we do a limited range, 4 products in double-sided for those people who wish to produce books or folios. And if you go to PermaJet.com, you can see the pricing on those and the services. There's Oyster, Luster, double-sided matte and double-sided portfolio for a fine art option. They're very popular for use with the snapshot albums, which is a spring-back type folio that we sell. Again, information on those products are available from PermaJet.com. So that's the flow charts over. Now it's just a bit of a recap on what you need to consider. The choice of paper is very personal because in the main, you're printing for yourself and not the acceptance of others. You know, if you're printing work for somebody else, for a customer, then of course the choice of paper may be more relevant to your client rather than yourself. But in the main, if you're printing for yourself, then the choice of paper is down to you. Not what I would choose or what your friend would choose, what you like, what gives you the image you're looking for. There is what I call a marriage between the image and the paper. Okay. If what comes off the printer doesn't make you happy, it's not quite right, it's not the image's fault and it's not the paper's fault. Okay. Change the paper. Try again. Okay. Sometimes it might be, the exposure or the frame of the image. Sometimes it might be the image doesn't quite work for whatever reason. Try a different image from the same portfolio. Sometimes that can work as well. But ultimately, or generally, it's the paper that's not working right for that paper. It's not giving you what you're comfortable with. Do consider, do you want a warm look, a neutral look, a cold look? Because again, that's down to you, what you actually are wanting to have, what kind of makes you tick in terms of certainly, cold or warm. There's a statement there at the bottom that says, do not be swayed away from trying a paper by the opinion of friends or peers. I mean, it's quite a long statement, but it came to me during the photography show a few years ago when a gentleman came up to me on our stand and showed me some images on his smartphone, said, Colin, what would you recommend for these images? And they were close-up images of fireworks in the sky, bright colours, vibrant colours, with an element of black in the background. And straight away, I thought, they've got to go on titanium. And at the time, we only had titanium luster. So I showed him some sample swatch images that we had on the stand of the titanium. The paper was compatible with his printer because titanium is compatible with any printer because it's from the digital photo range. I discussed profiles, which that he could download for his particular printer to maximize the color quality that he would get. He was happy with that. He said he would buy a box of A3. I'd filled out all the paperwork. I'd picked the stock from the stock room, put it in his bag. He had his £40 in his hand, and his mate walked up, and his mate said, "Oh, what are you buying?" He goes, "Oh, I'm getting some of this titanium." "Oh, I don't like that." He says, "Don't you?" "No." "Oh, I better not buy it then." And he walked away with his £40 down the aisle at the NEC. Now, from my point of view, those images would have looked great on titanium. His friend had obviously had an issue with titanium and had probably used an image on that paper that didn't work. And it wasn't titanium's fault. It was just that that gentleman's combination, that marriage hadn't worked. I do hope that the guy came back and actually tried it on titanium, because I think they would have looked stunning, but I don't know. So don't be deterred from trying a paper if you think it might give you what you need. If someone says to you, "Oh, you should try a particular paper," and it might not be a PermaJet one, it might be, Canson Platine or Photo Speed or whatever, give it a try. Give it a try. It might work for you. And that's the main thing. Okay, give it a try. So the lighting conditions you view the printing will affect how the print is perceived, okay, and can affect your paper choice. Here at PermaJet, when we're viewing papers and images, we always use a daylight viewing lamp, because it gives us consistency of light regardless of time of year, time of day. If you're using natural light at your home, a cloudy day versus a bright sunny day will give you a difference, because the amount of blue that's getting filtered out by the cloud and what is reflecting off the actual paper itself. If you're in a room, your lighting, is it tungsten, halogen, LED? They give out different wavelengths that can affect how the print looks. So please take that into account. Paper is totally dependent upon the ambient light within which you view it. Okay. If you have a room dedicated to printing in, and a number of people do, they have like a small box room or an office, consider the lighting. And we recommend halogen bulbs with a color temperature of about 5,000 Kelvin and a full color spectrum, and you can buy those online if you just Google them. That's going to give you consistent lighting, just like using a daylight viewing lamp, which is something like an angle poise that we sell. You can get information on the daylight viewing lamp at permajet.com. But think carefully about your lighting and also the color of your room walls. So a neutral wall color, forgive me, will give you the right light bouncing around the room. If it's strongly white or strongly dark, that can affect how your print looks. I did have a lady that came to me who told me at a camera club, I think it was a few weeks ago before Christmas. She'd moved house into and in the small room where she was doing her printing, the walls were orange. So that was just reflecting orange light all around, and she couldn't look at her print. She had to take them out of the room. So consider a neutral wall color if you've got a dedicated room to use for your printing. It just makes life easier. Printing paper is so dependent upon your lighting conditions, because you're comparing it against a transmission light. The screen is always bright and powerful, and should be calibrated, and you should reduce your brightness down on your monitor, and you can't print light. So what you see on screen versus what you print will always be different, but when you're comparing the print, please give it the optimum chance to prove itself. Do not be afraid to try something totally different. The joy of printing is the actual image coming off the printer itself, and having it in your hand and thinking, I did that, I created that, I'm really happy with it. And we have a number of people that say, oh, I print everything on Oyster or Gloss or whatever. And that's great, but maybe you're missing a trick. Maybe there's something in our range that you think, oh, that might be something worth trying. I'll give it a go. If you're in a competition, for example, a print judge may say, well, if you printed it on a fine art textured paper, you might have scored more because of reasons A, B, or C. but just think outside of the box, pardon the pun. Try something different. That's why test packs are a great way, as I say, to dip your toe in the PermaJet media waters. It's a low cost. I mean, what I wouldn't like you to do is say buy a box of, say, portrait rag A4 for about, say, 30 quid, and realize that when you've done your test print, I wish I got the portrait white now. And you have to spend another £30, and then you've got that £30 box of portrait rags staring at you every day when you go into your office where your printer is. So if you're not too sure, buy a test pack, try an image on all the different papers and see which ones, and then you can invest into the paper of your choice. Okay, that's why we do test packs, Photospeed, Hahnemuller, all that. Our sister company, Online Paper, based here at Stratford upon Avon, we have all those test packs available, so you can get them through the Online Paper website. If PermaJet hasn't got what you're looking for, then we can obviously help you with other brands as well. Matte papers, as I said before, ideally should use a matte black ink if your printer supports it, and it tends to be at the high level of printers where you will have a matte black and a dedicated photo black. Custom profiles should be used to maximize the paper and ink color rendition, and we strongly recommend that. If you're getting a new printer or you're trying a new paper, you can always come to our website and see whether we have a generic profile on our server for your particular model of printer. It tends to be at the higher end, as I said earlier on. The lower end, like the more basic printers, without being rude to them, the 4-color printers, we may well not have generic profiles. However, we can still create you a custom profile, and there's information on that on our support page on permajet.com, and there's a section called ICC profiles as well that takes you through the process. But what we want to make sure is that your printer is giving you the optimum color rendition for the ink and paper that you're using. And if it's a PermaJet paper, the profiling service that we offer is free. If it's a non-PermaJet paper, then you can buy vouchers on our website and we'll do it for you. And there is no restriction on whose ink. So it doesn't matter whether you're using Marit ink or Blue Box or cartridge save, whatever. As long as it's PermaJet paper, then the charge is free. A lot of people find that our generic profiles work fine for them, and that's great. That means that your printer's working in the same band of performance as the one that those were created on in the first place. But printers can have up to sort of like 10% differential in performance. So if the colors aren't quite right using a generic profile, then have a custom profile created. That way you're saving money, because you're going to make sure your colors are right at the time of printing, and you're not going to be wasting ink trying to get things right. Get your colors right with a profile, and it will mean that your printing process is shortened, and you're saving time and money on ink and paper. Just to cover again, heavy textured papers look worse on a small print. Think big. Certain printers can't handle heavy or thick fine art papers, and therefore that may well restrict, as I said at the start, which papers you can use. If you are looking to purchase a printer, I mean, this slide is slightly out of date. Look at something like the Canon Pro 200, which is die, Pro 300, Pro 1000, depending on your budget. The Epson 700 and the 900 are their current models. The more you invest in your printer in terms of its cost to buy, and we're not just saying that because we are a Canon reseller, but the running costs are actually less. And an example is that the 8750 from Canon is about £260. It's got very small cartridges, and it works at about £2.50 a milliliter to replenish using Canon's own inks. If you go up to the Pro 300, which is about £689, and it's A3 plus and it's 10 color, cartridges are 14.4 mil, but your replenishment costs are about £1.18. You go up to the Pro 1000, which is A2. They are bigger cartridges. They are 80 mil cartridges. It's more of a production machine, but you're down to about 50p a milliliter. So although there might be a higher outlay at the start to buy that printer. One, you're going to get more inks because the more colors you have, the wider the color gamut you can hit. Also, the long term, you will have a cheaper running costs. Okay. If you want more information on the Canon range of printers that we offer, give us a call in the PermaJet office. Okay. So the key point to remember is that the final print must give you pleasure, and that can only be determined by you choosing the right paper for you for that image or images that you're printing. Okay. As I said, it's very personal. There is no right or wrong answer in terms of the paper you choose for your images. And it's not a cop-out, that statement. It's the fact. What suits me on certain images may well not suit you, may well not suit the person next door or whatever. But as long as that print, when it comes off, you're happy with and it gives you a smile, then that is the job done. Okay, so that's the end of this section now. So I'm going to stop the sharing of this screen, and my colleague Abby should be looking at the Q&As. Are there any questions there?
Yeah. Okay, so we've got first questions from Graham, who has said, can I use FB Gold Silk 315 in my Canon Pro 10s?
Yes, you can. Not a problem. The Pro 10 has been superseded now by the Pro 200, but it is a fine art printer. So yes, the Pro 10 certainly capable of handling that paper, and we will have generic profiles on the website for you to download. Not a problem.
Okay, next question from Andrew. Have you come across any issues with monoprints on some paper types with the Epson ET8550, which has both dye and pigment inks?
No, we haven't. I mean, I'll be honest with you, we haven't done extensive trials with the eco tanks from Epson. We do have a range of profiles on our website for that model, if I'm sure we have, but we haven't done extensive tests. The thing with printing monochromes is what we found with the Canon range of printers is that by using a custom profile gives you very good black and white results. When we were previously Epson, and we had like the 600 and 800 printers, for example, we found using the Epson advanced black and white option within the driver a far better way of getting neutral black and whites. And the reason being is when you create a profile, a color profile, and you're using monochromes, you're using equal quantities of all colors of ink effectively to create the profile. And what can happen sometimes, depending on the printer itself or the media type or the paper itself, sometimes you've got either a green or a magenta cast when printing monochromes. So at PermaJet, what we used to do is actually, we wouldn't use a custom profile. We would let the printer manage the colors, and then we would use the Epson written advanced black and white to give us neutral black and whites. But on the 8550, it's not a printer that we've done extensive tests on.
Okay, next question from John. Will the printer make the decision to use matte black ink?
Right. On the higher end pages, on the higher end printers, it's your media choice that actually determines that. So, for example, on the Canon Pro 300, if I'm printing on our museum heritage, when I go into the printer driver, I will have to select heavyweight fine art paper. That media type tells the printer to use the matte black. If I chose something like Pro Platinum, for example, it would trigger the photo black. So what we do at PermaJet is on our profiles that you can download from the website, or if you have a custom profile made, we will ask you what media type you to select. And in each box of PermaJet paper, there is a media selection sheet that gives you a guide. So it'll tell you FB distinction. On an Epson, we recommend maybe semi-gloss. On a Canon Pro Platinum. The only thing about that document, it can get a bit out of date depending how long people have had the paper, for example. So always go to our website for up-to-date information or give us a call. But what we do on our profiles, the very last few letters on the profile name that we send to you would have an abbreviation like HWFA for heavyweight fine art, or the WCRW for watercolor radiant white. And that's an aid memoir to say, that's the media type you need to select in the printer side to activate the correct black. Okay.
Mike has asked, are there particular papers you would recommend for archival purposes?
If we were recommending for archival purposes, then really you'd be looking at the FB Baryta or the Fine Art ranges, because they're going to give you the ultimate archival quality when used with pigmented inks. But like I said during the talk, it comes down a lot to storage and display. But you know, anything behind glass or anything in a pH neutral sealed box that's sealed from the environment should last regardless. But if you're wanting to guarantee things, it's a fine art paper with pigmented inks to give you the optimum potential.
Bob has asked, would it be possible to put a paper type label on the rear of the test pack sheets?
Well, I think you know the answer to that, Abby, don't you?
Yeah.
We're actually working on it at this moment in time. Our colleague Debbie has been tasked with that, because since I've been here 11 years, it's been my biggest bugbear, is the fact that we don't actually put on the back of each paper what it is. And we have now got a resolution to that. I'm not sure when it's going to be implemented. I would think in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks, that new test packs will have on the rear of each sheet what it is. Okay, and that'll bring us into line with some of our competitors.
Okay, John has asked, I have been given a box of FB Distinction 360, which I know is an old paper. It now has a curl and won't feed my SCP 700. Can I possibly flatten it? And do you still have the ICC profiles available? Right.
Sorry, was there a printer model mentioned there, Abby?
The SCP 700.
Right. We won't have a profile. We won't have a generic profile for the P700 because the paper was discontinued before the 700 was launched. We can create a custom profile. That's not a problem. Now, the issue with curl, this is common to all Baryta papers, not just the PermaJet range, but also certainly to the Hahnemuhlers and Photospeeds, because I've seen it. And it's an unfortunate kind of side bit of the paper, and it's where the edges can curl up. I don't know whether you can see on the screen, but what I tend to do is I hold the sheet between my thumb and forefinger and just kind of float the paper like that, so it gently anti-curls the corners. Okay. There is some people who would turn the paper around and try and anti-curl it gently over the edge of a desk. My predecessor used to do that. I wasn't too in favor of that, in case you mark the coating. So as I say, I hold it's generally the corners, and I hold it like that. Trying to put a heavy weight on it, it won't do it at all. The extreme way to get around it would be to buy a anti-curl roller, but they are about £200, so it's probably an excessive amount. But they are used by our lab partners, where they are using large, printed large images on Baryta papers, and sometimes they have to anti-curl them.
Okay, the next one, it's not a question, but Patricia has said, I find that some papers don't handle intense blues well. I don't know if you have any comments on that, Colin.
What we found is that there's certain issues that we sometimes face is on a blues. I've seen it on some like a vibrant, like an electric blue, on a very again, it's like electric green kind of color, salmon pink. There are certain colors that ink struggles to be able to reproduce that you can see on screen. Certainly an issue, but about a year or so ago, a lady was having an issue because she photographed a prom. One of the girls was in a salmon pink dress, but it was quite shocking pink, and she was struggling to replicate it. And it's just because really it was out of the capabilities of the ink to actually produce it. So it's more down to the ink rather than the paper being able to produce that to produce certain colours, unfortunately.
Okay, so Alan, both Alan and Graham have asked similar questions, but Alan has asked, I use an X-Rite paper profiler to profile my papers.
Mhm.
Will that be more or less accurate than sending a print to PermaJet for profiling? And Graham's question is similar, but with a colour monkey.
Right. The X-Rite I'm not familiar with, but the Colour Monkey, if memory serves, does 50 patches. The PermaJet profile patch is 1013. So we don't knock the Colour Monkey because it's some form of colour management, and some colour management is better than none at all. So if you have a Colour Monkey, that's great. What we would say is with 1013 colour blocks to have profiled, we're going to give you a bit more colour control than maybe what the Colour Monkey can achieve. With regards to the X-Rite, as I say, I've got no history with that, so I can't actually comment. But if it's similar to the Colour Monkey in process, I would think the same argument or comment would apply.
Okay, Andrew said, presumably you would advise custom profiling all papers in a test pack before trying them.
Not necessarily. If there's a generic profile, then download that and try. Okay. That's always a starting point, because that will give you a good guide as to whether it'll work or not. If it's a printer we don't support on the website currently, then yes, send a single sheet in. We'll profile it, and then you've got another sheet. Sometimes some of the test packs have 3 sheets, just depends on which one it is. But if you wish to do so, use one sheet to get a custom profile, and then you can try a print on the extra sheet.
Andrew has asked, do you provide a full suite of paper profiles that can be downloaded in one folder, or is it only one at a time? And do you service Canon printers?
Right. In terms of the profiles, right. Well, again, Abby, I think we're looking at that, because certainly on our old website, you were able to download a folder, okay, that you unzipped, and it had them all in. When we went to our new website, the train of thought was that people only wanted to do individuals. They didn't want them all. So we went to an individual process. I believe that actually we're going to, by the middle of the year, that's going to be reversed, and you will then have the option to download a folder with them all in. If people don't wish to do that via the website, then just give us a call in the office, and we can transfer the whole folder over to them if they wish anyway. And the second part of the question was?
Do you service Canon printers?
No, we don't. We don't service Canon printers. Anybody that needs a Canon printer servicing, we refer to CRC Tasktron, based, I believe, in Reading. They are a Canon repair centre, so we tend to direct people there.
Okay. John has asked, will this recording be available to us? And I'll answer, yes, it will be. We'll upload it on our YouTube in the next couple of days. So if you just search PermaJet on YouTube, you'll be able to find us.
Okay.
Guy has asked, I've calibrated my monitor and profiled the output from my R3880, but still my mono prints come out incredibly dark with poor shadow detail. Should I be using a brighter paper?
Well, one, you can choose a brighter paper. Are they using a profile, Abby? Was they saying were they using a profile?
It doesn't say, no.
Right.
Oh, sorry, yes, it does. It is profiled. Right,
okay. Two things. With the 3880, one, you might wish to try and use the Epsom Advanced black and white setting I told about before, because that is supported on the 3880. The other thing to remember is, or to take into account, I should say, is that prints will always be darker than your monitor. Always. So it's not uncommon to actually, before you print, that you actually lift the brightness maybe by about 20 points in Photoshop, and then print to give a false kind of lift to it. It's what I would call a cosmetic lift. It doesn't affect, I mean, certainly with colors, it doesn't affect colors. And it's, you know, we sometimes do that here, where we will look at it and think, yeah, I just need to give it a bit more lift artificially through Photoshop, so when it prints, it's a closer match to what we have on screen. But you're competing with transmission light, very bright, versus reflective light. So yeah, that's one of the steps I would take to see if that resolves the issue.
Okay, an anonymous person has asked if they can get a copy of the flow chart that you were showing earlier.
Yes, not a problem. If they want to just email into the office, not a problem, or ring the office, we can send that through. Not a problem.
Wendy has asked, if you get custom profiles done using a Mac, would the same profile work with a Windows PC?
Yes. Yes, in simple, yeah, the same profile can be used. I mean, for example, I use a MacBook, which has got obviously a Mac side, but it's also got Windows, so I can demonstrate Windows drivers versus Mac drivers, and it's the same profile. So you don't need to have two different profiles. No.
Okay. Tom has asked, I print photo books. I'm currently using Pinnacle Matte 170 double-sided. The books I get commercially printed are thinner, around 130 GSM.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do a similar paper in luster, if possible?
What, at 130 weight?
Yeah.
No. The lightest we go is now you've asked me, haven't you? Double-sided is about 280, I think. I'm just turning around to see if I've got any double-sided here. Because it's got coatings on either side, the oyster is about double-sided oyster is about 280, I think, and maybe 290 for the double-sided luster. So there's nothing lighter than that, I'm afraid, purely because you've got two coatings on either side. So, you know, it increases the weight. So, no, we can't go that light.
David has said, what would you suggest for a fine art paper for safari wildlife that retains really sharp detail? I'm currently using Gloss 271, but I would like a heavier fine art paper.
Okay, right. Goes back to what I was saying during the talk. So, you know, if it's wildlife and you're wanting to retain sharpness, then I would be probably looking at the fiber Baryta range. Probably, again, if it's wildlife and, you know, there's warm colours in the scenery, fibre-based gold silk or royal gloss. A gloss or luster finish tends to show or give a bit more definition to sharpness. As I say, the matte papers, sometimes you might just get a little bit of softening. But, you know, I've seen some images the other week of, I think it was a lion and a cubs on a safari that was printed on museum heritage and looked absolutely beautiful. But it had it did have that kind of softness look to it, but it looks stunning.
John has asked, how long approximately does it take to turn around custom profiles?
Well, that all relies on our friendly post service. But if we receive profiles in the office here, I would generally, at the moment we're doing, it's probably about a 2-day turnaround. So if they arrive today, they should be processed and output in 2 days' time. So Friday at the latest. We try and do them same day if we can. It just depends on resource within the office.
Linda has asked, I have an Epson XP900 Express Premium. It has a photo black together with a black. Are the Epson inks I use in it pigmented? Do you know? Right.
They will be, I'm just checking on the XP900, top of my head. One of the blacks and the colours will be dye and the other black will be pigment. That's typically what is the arrangement. Certainly, I know that is the case with the Canons, and I think Epson follow a similar route on that. But you'd have to check with the technical specification on the Epson website for that particular printer.
Okay. Andrew has said, I'm concerned about trying canvas on a Canon Pro 1000 for the first time. Do you have any advice or must-dos?
No, not at all. Well, sorry, we do. There's no issues using canvas on the Pro 1000. Sorry, I didn't mean it to sound like no, don't do it. We do A3 plus sheets of our canvas. You may well need to use a loading sheet, which we supply with our canvas test packs and A3 plus packs anyway. And that's just to really give a bit of support to the canvas going through the printer itself. But there should be no issues whatsoever. You probably would need to use the feed at the rear just to give it a slightly less acute transport slope. But there should be no issues whatsoever.
Okay. Gordon has asked, have the colour issues been resolved with the Canon Pro 300 using a Mac?
Right, that's probably, if it's Mac related, that's driver related. And the last, 12, 18 months, we've had a number of issues with Macs and printing. And it's because of Mac's desire for people to use their AirPrint driver. So when you add a printer, if you buy, a printer straight away now, or you get a new Mac and you connect it to your printer first time, Mac will automatically use its own written AirPrint driver. And unfortunately, the AirPrint driver written by Mac is greatly reducing its functionality. And a lot of customers have realized they're missing paper options. Sometimes you only get plain paper or photo paper. Whereas if you're using the printer manufacturer's driver, you will get, luster, gloss, semi-gloss, heavyweight fine art, or the whole raft of them. If you have an operating system upgrade, even if you don't change from, say, Monterey to Ventura, but Monterey 12.6 to 12.7, whatever, what can happen is that part of that process is that the AirPrint driver will be reinstalled by Mac. So what we say to people is always make sure by going to your Apple symbol, system preferences, printers and scanners, highlight the printer and look at options and supplies. And if you've got a driver that says 12.2 or 20.3 or whatever, you're on the proper driver. If it says 2 or 3 version, you've got an AirPrint. If you haven't got all the paper options, you're on AirPrint. And what you have to do is delete the printer off and then re-add it. The other thing there, Abby, on that question is always connect, from PermaJet's point of view, always connect your printer using either an Ethernet or a USB cable. Because if you use Wi-Fi with a Mac, it will automatically only allow you to use the AirPrint driver. If you're not on a Mac, you're on Windows, we still recommend USB or Ethernet because of the speed of transfer of data. It can stop buffering, because sometimes if you get buffering, the printer will stall and start again. And sometimes, depending on the paper, you might see what we call a dry down line differential. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, we've got 2 more questions. So Robin has asked, can we purchase paper direct from PermaJet or through a third party?
Whatever you wish to do. Certainly PermaJet.com. We're happy to take your orders. But yes, we have some valued reseller partners in the UK. Really, it's a case of shopping around to see what you can get as the best deal, to be honest. Some of our resellers, do offer discount off our web prices. So yeah, we're happy to take orders direct, and we will ship either Royal Mail or DPD, depending on the weight of the consignment.
Okay, last questions from Mike. He's asked, how long after printing should an image be left to dry before framing or mounting it behind glass, etc.?
Okay, ideally 24 hours, depending on the size of the print as well. If you do it too quickly, and depending on the media type, and this tends to be a little bit more like on the gloss or lusters, there's what we call a gassing off process. While it's still, even though when the print comes off the printer, it's what we call touch dry, there is still inherent moisture within the coating itself, which needs to gas off and dry fully. So if you do it too quickly, depending on the size of the image and the media you use, you may get cockling, because the moisture's got nowhere to go. So it'll go maybe back into the paper and it doesn't look good. So ideally, leave the print overnight in an ambient room temperature, and then mount and put behind glass. And then you shouldn't have any issues whatsoever.
Lovely, that's all the questions.
Okay, if there's nothing else, is there any other messages we want to get out? We've got the January sales on at the moment, haven't we, Abby?
Yeah, so yeah, we've currently got the sale on the website. If you visit PermaJet.com, it's under the shop section at the top. That will be available until the 16th of January. So we've got a few old stock items, things that just have slightly damaged boxes, but are still in good condition. So lots of bargains that you can find on there.
Okay, thank you very much, Abby. If there's no further questions, I'd just like to thank everyone for their attendance tonight. I hope it's given you food for thought on the process of choosing the right paper, or the art of paper selection. There isn't a tried and trusted, this is, portraits can only be on this, sport can only be on that, weddings only on this. That doesn't apply. It's whether the paper and image work together and you're happy with it. And ultimately, as I say, that's the acid test. If you're happy with the print, then the combination you have used has worked. Okay, so if there's no further questions, Abby, nothing else popped up at the bottom?
No, we've just had a few thank yous, which is nice.
All right, well, thank you very much. Yeah, so hopefully this will be the first of a number of webinars we'll do throughout the year. And for those still here with me now, thank you very much indeed for your attendance tonight. It's a little bit of a hiccup at the start. I do apologise about that, but that's just technology and having a salesman here and a technical guy working on it. But thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening. And if you have any questions or follow-ups, please do get in touch via the website and or give us a call in the office. Contact details are on permajet.com. Okay. So on behalf of PermaJet, thank you very much indeed. And I will close the session now. Thank you.